Hello, this is Unsung with GameLeap, and in today's video we're going to be covering the patch 13.19 full notes. There are a couple of additions to this patch from the last time that we've covered these notes. Basically, Briar is getting nerfed, AD LeBlanc is also receiving some changes, so make sure that you stay tuned to see how this will affect you in solo queue. Also, if you ever want to learn any of the champions mentioned in these patch notes, make sure that you check out GameLeap.com by clicking on the description box below. I have spent hundreds of hours making perfect courses for these champions. Go ahead and give the website a look. First and foremost, Azir's Q cooldown is being increased. This is a nerf for pro play. If you like playing Azir in solo queue, I'm sorry to say, but Riot really does not want this champion to have a 100% pick ban presence in Worlds, and so you are forced to suffer. This is the sad reality of balancing the game around pro play. Azir does have a lower than average win rate in solo queue, and it's very obvious as to why. He is item reliant, and it's hard to make use out of him if you don't have perfect spacing. Once you do access these, then you can play the more abusive style of Azir that pros do, but unfortunately, this playstyle gap is so big that they're nerfing him even though he's like 44% win rate in solo queue. I would recommend not actually playing Azir this patch and waiting until season 14 to touch this champion. Hopefully the new items will make him more fun to play, and Riot has also stated that they won't be balancing around pro play as much, so hopefully changes like this will not continue to go through. Next up, Briar is receiving nerfs. These are all warranted. This champion is completely overpowered, and it does not take a scientist to tell you this. So on release, Briar had one of the lowest win rates of all time. This is due to how different her playstyle is, not due to how strong she is. Briar could have done without the hotfix buffs that she received. This champion is a complete snowball machine. She wins basically every 1v1. She's stat checky as all hell. The Q is such a strong ability, and her ultimate is basically always up with a massive range, and it makes her incredibly hard to shut down on the map. For these reasons, Briar is receiving nerfs. They're nerfing her attack speed growth, which is kind of a strange nerf, to be honest. A champion that is so auto attack reliant wants a lot of attack speed. Briar's W gives her a huge amount of attack speed. This might be a little bit clunky and remove an auto or two from fights, which is not really the kind of change that we want to see as an auto attack reliant champion. This is a more heavy-handed nerf than it looks like for that reason. They have also updated Briar's Q. This is a bug fix. It doesn't really matter too much unless you're playing Lethality Briar, and they are giving her a blood frenzy bar. So if you're new to Briar, you could actually see when she's going to bite you and whatnot based on her W's time. Of course, Briar wants to try to bite you at the end of the W unless she absolutely needs the healing. So this frenzy bar is really nice for the Briar player and then everybody around this. Next up, they are nerfing the healing on Briar's W. This is for good reason. Goredrinker is without a doubt Briar's best mythic item, and the reason for this is it is simply too in line with her general game plan. Briar wants to dive deep, go hard, and continue sustaining throughout a fight. Goredrinker is the best item for that. Stridebreaker is a decent alternative, but it doesn't do it as good as Goredrinker does. So for Goredrinker Briar, this is a slight nerf. We still get the access to the Thirsting Slash active and to the Omni Vamp that Goredrinker does provide, but our W's healing overall is going down. I would say that this is fair. Briar's jungle clear is incredibly healthy, and when she does actually skirmish you, it's very hard to kill her unless you're playing a heavy burst damage champion and you can force her E. She generally wins pretty much every skirmish at levels 3 to 4, so this nerf might make her a little bit more susceptible to these early game champions. Going with the early game nerfs, they're also reducing the amount of damage that she does to monsters. This will slow her clear down, which is good because Briar's clear is one of the faster clears in the game currently. She is way too healthy for how fast her clear is, especially on the blue side of the map. Briar like 3-shots Gromp. If you smite Gromp and then you bite it, it basically just gets deleted off the face of the planet. So they're also changing the missing health damage that you get to also nerf her combo smite as well. This means that Briar might spend a little bit more time in her jungle, be a little bit less healthy coming out, and hopefully will not take over games so quickly, so you can actually have a chance to play against her before she pops off and snowballs and then runs you down. In her current state, I would imagine that Briar does receive more nerfs, so I would recommend for you to actually abuse this champion while you can. Briar is free LP, her ban rate is super high and really high elo. It's pretty obvious into why. I'm playing a lot of Grandmaster lobbies right now, and she's banned basically 99.9% of the time unless people on blue side want her, so I would recommend that you play her while you can, so that way you can get that LP while you have the chance. Galio is receiving a buff to his R's cooldown. They're reducing the cooldown by 20 seconds. This is a really good buff because Galio does not have the greatest matchups into mages, which is hilarious because in this post, they basically talk about Galio being weak in all skill brackets and that he has good matchups into mages. However, when we looked over these patch notes a week ago when they dropped the tentative list, they said that Galio is pretty weak and is countered particularly hard by some of the mid-range mages in the meta. So which one is it? Is Galio strong into mages or is he weak into mages? In my opinion, he's very weak into mages, and it does show. Galio is not an anti-mage, and he has not been for a very long time. This ulti is for his disruption potential and his secondary engage potential more than anything. Galio does not have the greatest of matchups into a lot of mages right now, and it's very obvious as to why. So this is more than likely a buff for Galio in Worlds that's thinly veiled. I would recommend that you play Galio if you have Camille on your team. The Galio-Camille combo is completely broken, and that is probably what Riot is trying to buff here. If I were a betting man, that's what I would bet on, but that pretty much sums up that change. Next up, Gangplank's R cooldown has been decreased, and they're also changing the way that his upgrades work. This is pretty nice for GP. I don't understand why Riot wants to buff this champion personally. I think that GP is in a decent spot. If you are a good Gangplank player, it does show. This champion does have a higher than average win rate if you do have a lot of games on him. This champ is also very oppressive in the right hands, and basically nobody likes playing against him. So buffing him is an interesting choice for sure. This is the least frustrating buff that they could possibly give this champion. They decreased the cooldown of Cannon Barrage by 10 seconds, which is really nice, and they also upped the slow on his Death's Daughter by 15%, and they increased the movement speed buff on his Raise Morale by 10%. The 10% Raise Morale buff doesn't really matter because you get this so late into the game. This is GP's last purchase upgrade, and changing this won't do anything to make it be bought first. Death's Daughter is kind of the second most purchased upgrade, depending on what kind of GP player you are. A lot of GP players like to rush fire at will. Maybe this will make rushing Death's Daughter a little bit more attractive. It is only a 1 second slow though, so it might not be super oppressive, but you might get a barrel or two off in a fight where you wouldn't be able to before. Overall, I don't think that GP needs buffs, but this buff is actually quite nice in how Riot chose to go about it. I would recommend that if you're a GP player, you continue playing him, and if you want to pick up GP, this is probably the only significant amount of changes he'll receive for a while, especially with the item rework and the new season coming up. So if you want to learn him, now's the time. Jhin is receiving some buffs to his ulti's damage. It says it's only 14 damage, it's more than that. This is the minimum physical damage, right? So what we have to remember about Jhin's ulti is that it does percent health missing damage. The lower that you are, the more damage that Jhin does to you. So this adds up really quickly. If Jhin is shooting you and you're full HP and it's dealing 244 damage now, this means that the second and the third shot are going to hurt significantly more, and then the fourth shot might actually just straight up kill you. Right now, Jhin can kill basically any champion in the game if they are half HP at level 6. If you hit them with like a max range W and you drop your ulti and you hit all 4 of your shots, they will die. With this change, it might only take 3 shots instead of landing all 4, which of course is a massive buff. If you are a Jhin player, then this is looking quite good for you. If you want to learn Jhin, I would recommend playing him. His matchups right now aren't the greatest, and that probably won't change until the item rework comes through. If there are a lot of tanks on the enemy team, I would not recommend playing Jhin, but definitely give this champion a whirl. His ulti is really fun to use. Also, Lethality Jhin is kind of sleeper right now. If you like playing any Lethality champion, go Collector into Ghostblade on this champion. You will two-shot people. It's really fun. LeBlanc has received a bunch of nerfs. This is the biggest, most highlighted change on this entire patch, and there is good reason as to why. LeBlanc has a new build where she's going Static Shiv into Trinity Force into Hullbreaker, and it is incredibly uninteractive. Think about inting Scion and then turn it up to 200 because she's a ranged champion that has a bunch of dashes, and that's basically what AD LeBlanc is. This pick could have potentially ruined the World Championship, and I wholeheartedly believe that people would have abused this in pro play if it was left alone and was able to go through. For these reasons, they're nerfing her attack speed ratio, upping her attack speed growth, nerfing her attack damage growth, nerfing her mana growth tremendously, and then also nerfing your mana regen. They want you to go Lost Chapter on this champion. You are forced to go Lost Chapter on this champion now for those reasons. They've also increased the ratio on her W and her E by 5% to make AP LeBlanc not hurt so much. These nerfs hurt AP LeBlanc. They hurt AP LeBlanc a lot more than it looks like they will. Overall, it sucks that AP LeBlanc is getting nerfed. The champion does not deserve nerfs. AP LeBlanc is actually quite weak, but AD LeBlanc, on the other hand, is an abomination and needs to be removed from the game. And unfortunately, until Riot completely changes the AP ratio on Static Shiv, I don't believe that LeBlanc will receive any buffs for a while, to be quite honest. So this is a cool change. This is definitely necessary for the game, for the health of pro play, and for your solo queue games. I'm sure that you guys have run into 1 or 2 of these AD LeBlancs by now, and yeah, there's no place for this in the game. Next up, Lee Sin is receiving a base armor increase. This is nice for his jungle clear. This will mean that he won't be so low, and if he gets invaded, he'll have a little bit of an easier time. They're also upping his Iron Will spell vamp by 5% in the early game, and they're nerfing his E when it's maxed. Jungle Lee Sin maxes Q and W and then touches his E last, and it's pretty obvious as to why. The W and the Q are very useful for jungle Lee, whereas the E does not provide as much utility. It's better to have a healthier fight overall in the early and mid game than it is to do a little bit more damage. So this change to his E seems like kind of a significant nerf, but if we go and we look at the numbers here, at rank 1 it's the exact same. At rank 2 it's nerfed by 5 damage. You get the idea. Most games don't go to level 18 as a jungler. At most they generally go to about 13 to 16. This is not a significant nerf for him at that stage of the game, and the changes to his base stats and his W make him a little bit more pickable. terrible. Lee Sin is not in a good spot right now. The jungle matchups are kind of rough. Riot wants him to see played in Worlds. That's why they're buffing him now. Speaking of champions they want to see in Worlds, Riot is buffing Lissandra's root duration on her W. Lissandra already has insane counter matchups. She has a really good win rate. If we go and we look at Lissandra on most stat sites, she does quite well into most mages. Her 2-item spike is really strong. They're buffing LeBlanc for pro play. They are not buffing her for solo queue as much as they're saying. Lissandra already does well into LeBlanc. She already beats Fizz and she already beats Akali. She also does well into Zed. This change is a ham-fisted pro buff. Play Lissandra while you can. That champ's over buff. Next up, they're buffing AP Nunu because of Kesha. This is straight up a Kesha buff. If you're a Kesha viewer or Kesha yourself, then of course this is just a straight buff for you. They have increased Nunu's AP ratio on his E by 15%. This matters a lot because now it has a 135% AP ratio instead of a 90% AP ratio. If you are looking to play AP Nunu, now is definitely the time. But I would not recommend this pick, to be honest. It's very hit or miss. It generally feeds if it doesn't do well. I do not want to see more AP Nunus in my game. I don't think that you guys want to see them either. So this change is kind of is an interesting one for sure. Next up on our list, we have Pyke. Pyke is in a weird spot. He has the most oppressive level 1 in all of bot lane. There's not a single champion in all of bot lane that can outtrade Pyke. Halo Blades, Sheep Shot, Ignite Pyke is basically like a walking level 1 kill machine. For good reason, he simply does too much damage and you cannot kill him in time. Pyke is very frustrating to play against, and he is a super hard snowballing champion, so they're buffing his health growth, which is really nice, because Pyke does get killed in the mid game, and in the late game, super easily. He's very squishy then. But they're also changing his Ghost Water type. So the reasoning for this is that they're trying to give him power without making his damage too oppressive, and they're also giving him an alternative ability max option with W for lanes where he won't be aggressively using E as much. The reasoning for this does not make sense, because most games for supports end at level 11. You are generally only about 11 by the time that the game ends, maybe even lower level if you're on the losing side, right? So that means that if we are level 9, how many points do we get in our other ability? We get 2. If we're playing W second Pyke, then we have a half second removed on our W if we're level 11. If we're playing W second Pyke, then we basically have a half second removed off of our W. This is not better than the damage on your E. Emax is definitely going to be the way to go. This is only a buff if you're playing Pyke in the ultra late game. This buff is odd, and honestly, I don't think it should have shipped. They should have done something else. Next on our list is Rek'Sai. This champion is overpowered. It has been overpowered for forever. The only reason that people don't play her is because she is very ugly. Rek'Sai is ugly and nobody likes listening to her scream, so she is not picked that often. She, however, is the highest win rate jungler in the game. Her and Bel'Veth are completely dismantling solo queue when they are picked, and for these reasons, they're nerfing Rek'Sai for high elo play and pro play, not really for unskilled play as much, because unskilled play does not like Rek'Sai because she's ugly. So they are nerfing her total amount of sustain when she's in her burrow. This is a good change. She needs these nerfs. They're nerfing her Q's damage, which is nice. This does need to get nerfed. Her Q is up basically all the time now, so nerfing the Q's damage is a more significant nerf than it looks like. They are nerfing her burrow movement speed. This doesn't matter too much. When Rek'Sai completes Stride Breaker, this nerf will basically be undone due to the way that movement speed soft caps work in the game. This will make her maybe survivable now. If you see Rek'Sai burrow into your lane, she might not be able to walk directly at you and then guaranteed hit the knockup. She could actually miss her point click knockup, who knows? But in order to compensate her, they've given her a massive amount of damage on her unburrow later on in the game. Hopefully this will make Rek'Sai not the most overpowered jungler in the game, but since her rework, Rek'Sai has remained at the very top as far as win rates go. You can go look at any stat site, and Rek'Sai is definitely the highest win rate jungler there. Renekton is being nerfed. They're nerfing his magic resist. This is for mid lane Renekton and for Worlds. This isn't really a nerf targeted towards solo queue. Renekton is the safest blind pick in the game right now. It's the only top laner that you could pick without having a completely agonizing time. So they're nerfing him to give him some counter picks. Basically, Renekton's only super hard losing AP matchup is Rumble, and they're trying to make Gwen, Kennen, and Rumble stronger against him. Renekton will always destroy Gwen. This is not going to change this matchup significantly. Kennen is a lane bully, but Kennen is terrible into Hullbreaker. Renekton can't itemize Hullbreaker, and Rumble is quite frankly overpowered right now. This will just make the Rumble matchup worse. This isn't a significant change. You should still play Renekton. Syndra's Q damage is increased. This is a buff for pro play. Riot just really wants to see this champion played. Syndra is completely fine in her current state. She has a lot of winning matchups. She does really well into AD Assassins. She is a strong contender against most mages, and overall this champion does not need buffs. This is a pro play buff for sure. Abuse this champion while these buffs are live. Twitch is receiving a missile speed increase. This is a necessity. There are a lot of times when you're against like Misfortune or champions with Ghost, and they will straight up outrun your Twitch auto attacks when your ulti is on. You should never feel like you are having a bad time or using your ultimate, and Twitch is definitely one of those champions that feels like his ultimate is kind of more of a hindrance than it is a help. If you're against a lot of movement speed on the enemy team, you can miss a lot of bolts. This change is really nice and will ensure that you won't miss too many bolts. They are nerfing Zeri for pro play. That is what this nerf is. Zeri is one of the lowest winner ADCs in solo queue. However, this champion is completely overpowered in both high level and pro play simply due to how mobile she is. A base movement speed nerf sucks. Straight up. If you're a Zeri main and you're not playing in Diamond Masters, Grandmasters, I'm very sorry to tell you that this is going to hurt you a lot. This is probably one of the worst nerfs that they could ever give this champion. A movement speed nerf on any champ is going to be significant, but because Zeri's movement speed bonuses on her ultimate are percentage based, it's going to hurt quite a bit getting this 5 movement speed reduced. That means that you're going to be a lot slower when you're eating through a wall, and definitely a lot less faster when you are in your ultimate, which really sucks. Randuin's Omen is receiving a buff by this against Yasuo, Tryndamere, and Yone, but this item is not really too great as it is right now. Receiving this 300 gold buff won't do too much to make this item better. There are simply more effective items, and unfortunately mythics are so overstated that you always want to complete your mythic over this item in the early game. This is a buff geared towards the early game. It won't really do too much. Seekers is receiving a buff. This is okay. AD mids are not super strong right now in high level play, but in low level play, they're pretty good. So this means that we can actually end up buying a Seekers if we're against the Zed or a Talon or a Kiana, especially if we have a bad time with this matchup. I would recommend that you actually buy this early, test it out, see if you like it. If you don't, then definitely go back to, rushing your mythic, but this is a nice little alternative. Static Shiv is being nerfed for LeBlanc. That is what this change is, unfortunately. This item is imbalanceable in its current state. It should just only be an AD carry item instead of being pushed by basically every class in the game. It's very apparent as to why this item is such a balanced nightmare, and hint, it's not because of the wave clear. When Shiv got removed the first time, it had way stronger wave clear, and it actually critically struck. It just had a worse stat profile. So what ended up happening here is this item got poached by mages and other classes. It was way too overpowered because Riot gave it an AP ratio. It's still too overpowered because it, removes some of the weaknesses from mages. This item should not be strong on mages or LeBlanc or basically anything like that. You should have to build more of a stat to make this item more effective. Riot really wanted to give this item a level scaling for the amount of bounces that it does, and this has basically impacted the game negatively. If you're able to play Shiv in a solo lane, it's really oppressive. If you're able to play Shiv bot lane, it's not super oppressive, but it's decent. It's basically the worst on AD carries right now, and better when used by a class that poaches it. This nerf is to LeBlanc, and this was already confirmed in like a Reddit thread. A couple of other things to note about this patch. They are adjusting pings. This is probably one of the most negative changes I have ever seen. In order to remove some of the toxicity that people are facing in their games, they've developed some new functionality that allows them to adjust on the recipient of pings. When you ping your allies like Summoner or like their ultimate or like whatever, it won't show to them anymore. If your ally has like a trinket and you're trying to like ping it to like let them ward, Riot doesn't like this because people are using it to bully each other. What everybody thinks happened is that a Rioter played a high elo game and got spam pinged for performing kind of poorly on Karthus and solo losing a game, and he ended up getting pinged a whole bunch. Then he immediately went to Twitter afterwards and then released a statement about how they are going to change these, and they're also removing the bait ping, which is fair. I mean, like, the bait ping is kind of toxic, right, in its current state, but what isn't so cool is removing communication from the game. This is one of the most negative changes I have ever seen in all of my time playing League of Legends. You should be able to ping your allies' ultimate and their trinket and their summoner spells and stuff like that. If you are trying to ping that you're wanting to turtle for like an ally's ult, you should have that option. There is definitely an extent of where like being too nice has gone too far, and this is it. If you looked at any sort of social media, be it like Reddit or Twitch or YouTube or basically anywhere else that League of Legends has talked about, everybody hates this change, and it's pretty obvious as to why. This is a terrible change, and I hope that this gets hotfix removed. On top of this, Riot is reworking behavioral systems and making it so that way if you're chat restricted or something, then you'll have to go and play normal games or ARAMs or like random game modes or whatever. This is kind of another negative change because then the toxic people have to go and play with the people that don't deserve it, which is kind of weird, to be honest. I wish that they focused less on people typing and focused more on people actually ruining games, and making it so that the players that are playing normals and stuff have to deal with these toxic players is a weird change in my opinion. Personally, I don't agree with either of these changes. I think that they are a band-aid fix to an overall deeper issue. I can mute somebody's pings. I can't mute when somebody's feeding my game. I would rather that somebody that is feeding gets punished harder than somebody that's trying to communicate. So Riot, of course, will listen to feedback if they choose to. Most of the time they choose to ignore stuff like this. We'll have to see if next patch this gets reintroduced, but this is a pretty negative change in my opinion overall. Anyways, this was Unsung with GameLeap. Thank you all for watching and hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next video.